Hi, and welcome back to the Views Expressed. We have a great episode coming up for you here. Thank you, Representative Jack Lewis, Democrat 7th Middlesex, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Mikita, for having me. I was actually driving here and remembering that it was almost 9 years ago to the day that we sat in the studio shortly after announcing I was running for state rep.
Oh my goodness, that's has it been 9 years?
9 years. Uh, you haven't aged at all, but
Neither of you.
no. Well, thank you. I remember being told that my face was too shiny and that my shirt and tie didn't work. So I'm hoping 9 years later, my gray hairs and wrinkles distract folks from those realities.
And mine as well. So, it's great to see you. For folks who don't know, Representative Lewis does represent Ashland, but also parts of Framingham as part of the seventh. And we're just gonna open up. There are a lot of things going on Beacon Hill. There are a lot of things going on in Ashland. There's a lot of things where those things are kind of intersecting. We're gonna we're gonna run the gambit here. We're gonna see what happens. So the first thing I'm gonna ask you is kind of controversial, but it's something that I've been seeing on a lot of the other political talk shows, and actually some folks are very curious about. Back at the election, we had a ballot question around the auditor.
Well, that's all the time we have. Sir.
Okay. Well, I do want to get your take on this because um, folks are kind of frustrated, I think, right now. People voted for this ballot measure. They wanted the auditor to be able to audit, the folks up on Beacon Hill. Um, it's about, folks are saying it's about transparency. And then every time you turn on the TV, it appears that there's pushback. We see the speaker, different representatives, and they're like, well, this isn't, this isn't proper, this isn't right. And the people are just like, well, we asked for the auditor to be able to audit. So as you see it, what is this issue and why are we seeing this tension right now between the auditor and the House and Senate?
I'll be honest, this was a ballot question, and there were times where I was invited into conversations. But when I asked questions around what the intention of the audit was, I often didn't get answers back from the yes on the audit campaign. When I think of an audit, my brain first goes to taxes. You want to file your taxes, and you really don't want to be audited. And so I think there's a financial component of the audit. And then the only other kind of audit I know is one of substance. And so when I think of the idea of the auditor auditing the legislature, if it's a financial audit that she is after, that information exists. My salary is public knowledge. Who pays for the rat traps or mice traps in our offices? Like that information is not secret in any way. When it comes to a performance audit, I agree with the speaker and the Senate president and the majority of my colleagues that there is a question about what it means for a different branch of government to decide what my performance should look like and how one would audit that. And I think there is a separation of powers argument that is going to play itself out in the courts. The attorney general approved the language to go on the ballot, but she didn't comment on was the language constitutional. It was, is it enough to go on the ballot? Now we're going to see how that plays out. The House has been committed to, if the people want an audit, we'll give them an audit. And what the House has said is, why doesn't the auditor pick an independent auditor and somebody who operates independent of our two branches of government to come in and do that public audit? I've known the auditor for 8 years. I can't wrap my mind around what she thinks she's going to find or what she hopes to find. And I don't think we need a political audit. I don't think that's appropriate in our official positions. And I think we need to leave personalities out of it, which is why I think if people are curious how things are paid for, the information's there, but an independent audit might make it more easily available. And beyond that, you are my constituent. You get to decide if my performance reaches the standards that you set, not a different branch of government.
Because it's an election, right?
Yes.
I get, if I'm not happy with your job performance,
Every 2 years,
every 2 years,
yes.
I can let you know that. But I think there was a lot there. I just want to unpack it a little bit. So, first off, I think I think there's a lot of confusion out there as to like what exactly is this audit, right? Because you're saying that basically all the financial information is in the public domain already. So we know what you all make. We also know what you spend in your offices. And that's just public information. We can go get that at any time.
Most of what we spend in our offices, we either have to pay for ourselves or come from our campaign fund. So, like, if I buy a book of stamps prior to becoming a chair, which we'll talk about maybe a little later,
Yep, we will.
first 6 years as a state rep, my stamps came out of my campaign account. I take my staff out to lunch. There is no like state house debit card that you're handed when you're elected. You have to figure out how that's paid for. Those citation covers
Yeah.
that we hand out, the piece of paper inside your tax dollars paid for, that citation cover is $4 or $5. That is not paid for by tax
Oh,
dollars.
fascinating.
And so
Huh.
I joked about the mouse traps.
Yeah.
I don't pay for those. So I'm guessing that there's an official line item in a spreadsheet somewhere that taxpayers pay for those. But yes, that information's available. If there are questions about it, we can dive deeper. She seems to want more, and I don't know what that more is. And that's the part that I most struggle with.
Okay. Yeah. I think that the one thing I think just as a voter, that's kind of confusing. I mean, thank you for the explanation. That does clarify a few things, but as a voter, it's a little perplexing because, I heard the speaker talk about like, oh, there may be a separation of powers or state constitution. This may be unconstitutional. Why wasn't it? Don't ballot questions go through that sort of review before people get a chance to vote on them? Like, what is that process about?
As I understand it, the Attorney General's office has to approve the language to go on the ballot.
Okay.
Did it meet the minimum standards? Did it have the signatures required? I don't believe the Supreme Judicial Court does a preliminary look-see at
Okay.
them.
Okay.
I'll be honest, I was hoping there was going to be an aggressive pushback on the ballot question. I was hoping there would be a no campaign that got organized. It didn't. There were other ballot campaigns.
You can understand why there wouldn't be an aggressive no campaign.
I would have happily-
on the face of it. Like,
I'll be honest, I would have happily
Yeah.
spent personal time on that. I think the current auditor served in the House, served in the Senate.
Mhm.
This work is all about relationships. And for whatever reason, she now thinks that it's politically advantageous to go after, in my opinion, the House and the Senate. And if there was something I thought she could find or that was there to find, I would be happy to have that conversation. But it seems political, and I don't have time or patience for that. But yeah, so now we have said you want an audit. We'll do an independent audit.
Okay.
You hire the person. Doors are open, and she is not going down that road with us. So
Yeah.
now we'll wait for the Supreme Judicial Court to make a decision ultimately. And through all of that, though, I'm going to keep responding to constituent emails and keep showing up at the senior center, keep passing bills. And yeah, I have nothing to hide. So
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think maybe the one thing that could come out of this is actually taking a look at the process by which these questions do get on the ballot. Should they go through some sort of like more of a fine tooth comb legal review to make sure that whenever we're asking the voters, because I think for the layperson or someone who you got a ballot question and vote on it, I expect if I pass it, then it's going to happen, no matter what the legality of it is, really. So that might be a good thing that happens out of this. We get a little bit more of a tighter process when we're talking about getting things on the ballot, so that if they do come through, there may be some challenges here and there, but we've already sort of had like kind of like a bare bones review of like what's is it legal? Is it legal? Is it not?
agreed. I'll just say the question of what's constitutional is never set in stone.
This is
And
true.
so
This is true. You can
there's
always
a-
make an argument for and against, but
yeah. So
but some arguments are stronger than others. So I mean, and there's some things that are pretty. They're layups, right? Some things are a little bit more nuanced.
you know how much I love this sport. I'm hoping this is resolved sooner rather than later because but our country and world are facing some concerning challenges. And I'm happy to talk. Like I said, I talk about this potential audit till I'm blue in the face. But
Well, we won't do that.
no, that's all right.
We got a lot. Well, we got a lot more ground to cover, so we
Okay.
can't just stay there because apparently, and you alluded to this earlier. I was going to kind of spring it on the people, but some things have changed for you up on the Beacon Hill. Apparently, you found yourself as a chairperson, the Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government. What is that?
So last session, I was a chair for the first time, and it was the Federal Stimulus and Census Oversight Committee, which was great. I becoming a chair for the first time, it changes things. You have more staff, you have more responsibility. As you can imagine, the last 2 years, there wasn't a lot of federal stimulus money coming. There was money that had been allotted and making sure that was spent properly. But it was an interesting time of, is the government going to shut down tomorrow? So I was hoping to continue that work, but grateful that the speaker and my colleagues saw this new opportunity for me. The Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government receives, if not the most bills of any committee, it's the top handful of committees with legislation. The governor's bill relating to municipal empowerment, bills relating to double polls, utility double polls. Uh, but it also receives a lot of the home rule petitions. So when
For listeners out there, what
What
is home rule? Let's not get too technical.
no, it's true.
Yeah.
I try not to use acronyms, but yeah, home rule is one of the non-acronym technical words that just rolls off my tongue. Uh, our constitution is set up where if municipalities want to change certain things, the state legislature has to give their approval. Ashland used to have a board of selectmen. They changed it to select board. I literally had to pass a law in order to allow that to happen. Framingham wanted to put a right-hand turn lane near my house off of, I think it was Central onto Edgel. They were going to use a small plot of land differently. We had to pass a home rule just to allow this little section of land to be used ever so slightly differently. So home rules can range from Board of Selectmen changing its name to when Framingham became a city, like its charter had to be approved in a home rule. Most of those home rules now will go through my committee. And so I'm excited for a whole host of reasons. One of them being almost every legislator has at least one home rule every session. And I love this work for many reasons. I love working with my constituents, but I love that it's all about relationships on Beacon Hill. And some of those happen organically, some happen around the water cooler. Now, for those handful of colleagues I haven't connected with yet, we're going to connect because they're going to have a bill before my committee. And it'll give me a chance not only to get to know them, but what's actually going on in their communities. And it's not just a rubber stamp. I can tell you that one of my first home rules, I won't get into the weeds on it. I thought it was just going to be like rubber stamped. My first bill, I was celebrating in my head. Oh, no. Some outside group took offense to one component of it, and we had to go back and tweak it. But so that'll be my new responsibility on Beacon Hill. In addition to the 30 plus bills I filed, a lot of my responsibility working with my staff will be reviewing these home rules and hopefully bringing the governor and her team in to review the Municipal Empowerment Act, something that I know as a select board you all are talking about.
I can't speak for the select board in that capacity, but I think a lot of folks who are active in town and want to participate in meetings will take big interest in this, mostly because this is one of the things that allows remote participation. And, if that goes away, then it's all back in person 100%. So that's something that folks need to be aware of. So
I remember talking to one of your colleagues on the select board a week ago about this, and I was like, it'll go to its first committee, and then by the time it gets to me at the larger house, there'll be a role for me to play, but it's that first committee. Little did I know, a couple days later, I would be the chair of that first committee. And so I will be talking a whole lot more about the Empowerment Act than I would have had I been assigned a different committee. But
well, like I said, that's got a lot of the local interest, and not just for the electeds, but for the volunteers and just that particular practice. And it's just a numbers game. The need is outweighing the supply right now. So to be able to get a win-win like this in the Commonwealth. I think it's great for those physicians and their families, but it's also really great for people who need medical care in top-notch medical care. So, that's something I have seen in the media, that need. So, I mean, you'd say it's not in the Metro West Daily News, but
There wasn't an article. It was just toward.
yeah, yes. I think this is it's a big it's a big public health issue, and so, I don't wanna diminish it at all, because it's important. But, so I'm gonna throw you a little curveball. Yeah, I think, we alluded to this at the beginning. We're kind of in an interesting situation. We're recording this in the top of March of 2025, and, there's a lot of uncertainty around, uh, federal funding.
Mm.
And we know that federal funding rolls down, federal money comes to the state, can come through the cities and communities. I guess I'm trying to find out, well, we're all trying to figure out like how this is all going to land, and every day there seems to be another challenge in court. You have to disperse the funds, so you don't have to disperse the funds, from the executive branch. Um, I'm just curious as to what you and your colleagues are doing to kind of keep an eye on the situation, like, and what there isn't really much you can do about it, but I mean, how can we best posture ourselves for the uncertainty ahead? You know, just from your view of Beacon Hill, I've got a view down on the local level, but like, just from your standpoint, like what should we be vigilant about? What should we be keeping our ears to the ground on? And how do you think your colleagues will be able to keep an eye on this?
I am nervous. That's not a strong enough word. We both watch the same news. We live in the same reality. Uh, Multiple times a day. Today I started my day by talking to 10 nurses about changes in U.S. healthcare. And then I went to Worcester and spoke to about 70 social workers about meeting the needs of high need populations and most vulnerable people. And in both settings, I wanted to bring optimism. I wanted to be like, "It's gonna be all right." And I wasn't able to. I feared I was just a big wet blanket of sadness and despair, and I'm gonna try not to bring that same wet
Yeah,
blanket.
can we
Uh,
not? But here's
so
but let's be realistic though. Let's be
yes,
realistic. Like,
I think
what are we facing here?
I think many of us in this part of the country for the last 150 years have shied away from the idea of states' rights. Like, in fact,
For very good
very,
reasons.
very good reasons. Yes. So, the idea of the federal government, Massachusetts often leading the way, bringing the federal government along, and then the federal government, being forced the desegregation of schools, Loving v. Virginia,
Yeah,
marriage equality. These are
marriage
not
equality.
necessarily on the same level, but these just examples of we 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 lead the fight for equality and justice in Massachusetts. It spills over to the region. The feds get on board, and then the country gets on board. We are going backwards, and we now have a federal administration that is actively trying to take us backwards. Where I think it's most uncomfortable for a lot of us is not only the pendulum swing, but we're having to start talk about states' rights that we'll see in court. To quote
The
the
governor
governor
of
of Maine,
Maine. Yeah.
and that is going to be the case. And I think our Attorney General of Massachusetts is prepared for it. We can't forget who we are. We need to dive deep into those values. We need to dig deep, and we're going to fight like hell to protect who we are as a Commonwealth. What's scary to me is that protection can only go so far, and I don't know what's coming next. We can't print money in Massachusetts. We have to pass a balanced budget. About 25% of our state budget is connected back to the feds. So we're talking like 15 billion, with a B, $15
Yeah, I
billion
just want you
dollars.
to stop there. That's 25%.
Yes.
That's a
Uh,
big number.
it is a very big number, and you cut that by just a couple percentage points, and vital programs are gutted. And I think a lot of us are trying to prepare social service agencies,
Yeah.
prepare ourselves, prepare municipalities that this year's budget, you know, it looks okay, but we don't know what's coming. And there are going to be some very difficult choices that have to be made. And they're not going to be ones that we're happy about making. Uh, I, I'm unapologetically a progressive. I'm an optimist, but I'm hired to be a realist by my constituents. And I'm going to have to make some votes around the budget, around, as I've always done, around legislation that aren't going to be the ideal that I wish I could bring about had I had a magic wand or a cupboard of $60 billion.
Just lying around. But you should probably check your sofa cushions maybe before you say you don't have the money, Jack. I'm just saying maybe everybody should.
My kid's supposed to vacuum the couch once a week, and I wish I could say he does that, and I would know that there's not $60 billion there. But what I can tell you is, we're going to do everything we can. I think when it comes to basic rights and protections, the governor has told schools we don't need to pre-surrender. There are plenty of companies out there that have decided to fold on the values they put out there. So many companies that I don't even know where to shop anymore. Our schools and our organizations and our social service agencies, they don't have to do that. And if an edict comes from on high, we live in a democracy. The courts are going to play a role.
Sure.
And what I tell folks is, especially those who work with vulnerable populations, like, I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like, but our kids need to be supported. They need to be reminded on a regular basis that they're loved. And it's weird. If you would have told me 8 years ago that sometimes I'd get a call from a parent, a constituent in the community, in tears, fearful for their kid's safety, and one of the things I would ask is that they hug their kid tight, and maybe, this isn't the year to go hang out with a racist uncle for Christmas or Thanksgiving. Maybe not any year, but like our kids and people in our community, they're not hearing that they're loved in the same way that they once were by the corporations in our lives. They're not hearing it from the federal government. And now the teachers and schools in their lives are wondering what they can say without getting in trouble. And that ignores entirely the trolls on social media, which seem to find great joy in upping suicide rates and scaring and causing people great fear. Here's that wet blanket. Hold on, let's yeah, no,
I was gonna say,
we're gonna hug our kids. We're gonna hug our kids.
We're gonna hug our kids. But I do want to say, like, I think we are living in unprecedented times. And to your earlier point, especially around budget issues and support for many critical programs, we don't have collectively, it's, state or in local level, we don't have a magical money tree that we can just go and make everything better. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out over the next year or two and figure out, what we can do. But I'll say this, I think folks in the Commonwealth we're smart, we're resilient, we're creative, and I think all of us who care about our communities and care about our neighbors and our friends who may be the same or different than us, we're gonna pull together, I think, and help each other out. One of the things that might might be a shock to people, I think, is that through times like these, this tends to bring people together more so than bring them apart. It can bring people from different backgrounds and different different political persuasions even together to make sure that their communities, their families, the people that they care about are safe and are taken care of. So I think we're going to see some surprising results. You'd think because in times of scarcity, I think people get very frightened and there's a potential for all sorts of things. But I say I believe in America and I believe in Americans and I believe in Bay Staters and, I believe in all that stuff. And I believe in Ashland folks too in our town.
That was the answer I meant to give.
So
before my
sorry, just wrung out your blanket.
No, it's all right. I read I agree 100%. I think
Yeah.
we're gonna need to lean on each other.
Yeah.
None of us know what the future's gonna hold. And government, I continue to believe, 8 years in as an elected representative for Ashland, has an essential role to play in people's lives. And I think during the pandemic, we quickly learned that the decisions we make on Beacon Hill or in DC have not only an effect on people's lives, but people live and die based on some of the decisions we make. And I'm not that we shouldn't have difficult conversations about where we put our money, but I am, as somebody who every year through the state budget goes line by line through the budget and has to reflect on, yes, it's $30 million and it's a number that means nothing to anyone else, but that $30 million doesn't just employ people. Depending on what the fund is, it makes sure people have food in their bellies or a place to go. Uh, and those are the stories that I'm most concerned about, uh, if things go south. But I
Mm.
like your optimism.
Well, I have to be
You
an
have to be, and I
Yeah.
need to find that, and you need to help me kindle.
Well, we can all we'll lean on each other.
Oh yes, I'm gonna.
We are going to lean on each other for that because we all have our own kind of dark days as well. But that's what we're here for. That's what this community is here for. That's what we're here for. So, anywho, wow, we have really gone around the world here and talked about everything from the state, local, federal. Um, I guess one more question for you, Representative.
Representative, so sounds
Yes, I know.
I'm an lobbyist who doesn't know me very well.
Okay, no,
Okay,
okay, Jack.
just
One of our questions, Jack. We were just talking about the humanity that we see in our constituents, the humanity that we see, uh, you know, as public servants. Like, you're constantly helping people. Um, this is this is challenging work, and I know folks. It's very easy, I think, for folks to forget that elected officials are actually people too, because we're like all humans. But especially during these times, like how are you going to find a way to recharge and recenter yourself? Because I think it's good to share these sort of things. All of us can learn from each other about how to kind of stay centered.
I self-care has not been my journey. Uh, and so I put it off indefinitely. Uh, but as we were talking about before, I'm married. I have two kids that are still at home. They ground me. And it doesn't. A lot of this work is behind the scenes. There's very little is glamorous. There's actually no aspects of the job that are glamorous. I love every minute of it though. But there are times where you're like, oh, she called me representative. Uh, and then I go home and it'll be food's late. You're late, food's late.
Yeah.
I failed my tests. It's like, oh, okay. This is why I got into this work. When we first met 9 years ago, we had just adopted our first kid from foster care. So Josiah, we met him when he was 4. He was 5 when we went down this road of running for office. And everyone who becomes a parent, there's one day they're not a parent, and then the next day they are. For us, he was a semi-formed 4-year-old, and so things just came fast. But it was meeting his classmates at preschool. It was imagining his future that really lit the fire under me. I liked being a minister in a church. I liked running a nonprofit, but he only got one childhood, and I felt like I could do more than just the things I was doing. I miss delivering sermons, but I was like, I bet I could fight and change some of the law and maybe also do some public speaking on the side. What I haven't figured out is how to sort of honor that relationship with them.
Mm.
I work a lot, which is something now my kids are older. The two that still live at home are 12 and 15, so they want to make sure there's food and they want to know that there's support there from a distance. But if I could go back in time and find that sweet spot of work and home balance, I would have done it, but it would have been like 7 years ago when my kids still wanted me at home all the time. But yeah, as my now 15-year-old, my 15-year-old when he was 8 said something along the lines of, I shouldn't tell you the story, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Jack, because when my kids met me, I was just Jack and we were Jack and Brent, so which is why I love my first name being used. Jack, I hope you find a balance between the job we all know you love and the family you actually have before we grow up, give you grandkids, and you have to not try to mess up with them. Did we go to Disney within weeks of that, like, dagger to the heart? Yes, we did.
Yeah.
And so my advice to new reps is strike that balance early on with your kids. And things like vacation, I can't always get away from my phone, but I find that sometimes I can put my phone down for a couple hours with my family, and the world has not ended yet. But yeah, I love the job, and it's a job where there is always so much more to do. And I've never worked a 9 to 5 job. So I need to take care of myself so I can keep doing the work and so that my kids don't, put me in my place so easily. But I love them. And you probably haven't seen them in a while because they don't go grocery shopping with me anymore because, as you will find out, or probably already finding out, as people know you as the select board member,
Yeah, well,
they'll freak you out.
it's, people, I can see people like doing that with different, different kinds of situations. But I think that your advice, around, um, making sure you take time to spend time with the people that care about you the most is fantastic advice, not just for new reps, but for all the hardworking people out there trying to, do that. It's not even a 9 to 5. Most of us don't even work 9 to 5 anymore. We all work, crazy hours and also
Then you
try
have
to
your
have
community commitments as well.
community
Yes. Yep.
commitments and all these things. But everybody has those challenges. So that's just incredible advice, and I think we're gonna leave it there. So, Jack Lewis, thank you so much for joining us on The Views Expressed. It was lovely to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stay tuned for more community based conversations right here with WACA podcasts. Take care, everybody.